Hey folks! Tonight, we're not riding with legendary gunslingers through the desert. We're not going to have a midday shootout on the main street of a lawless town, or panning for gold in forgotten rivers. No. Tonight, we're going to do something much more common and infinitely more difficult. We will sell everything we have for a promise on a piece of paper, cross a continent in a creaky wagon, and try to build a house made of mud. Forget the duels of honor, the noisy saloons filled with exotic characters, and the boundless freedom of the open plains. Today we dive into the real thing. The dust that seeps into everything you own, the crushing monotony of the trail, the blizzards that can bury you alive, and the lonely, brutal war against a patch of land that won't be tamed. This is the true story of a pioneer family who conquered the West. And, spoiler alert, the conquest felt more like a slow, painful surrender to the landscape itself. It's a saga that takes us from the desperate hope of the East to the unforgiving reality of the Great Plains, following one family as they fight not for glory, but for a place to simply exist. So, before we get ready to roll, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But as always, only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're joining our caravan from tonight. It's always fascinating to hear where in the world you're all from. Now, dim the lights, perhaps find the sound of a lonely wind or the crackling of a fire to set the mood, and let's go west together. Your religion is dust. You breathe it, taste it in the back of your throat, and watch it settle in a thin layer on every surface of your life. The Missouri farm where you were born and where your father was born is tired. The soil, once dark and bountiful, is now a pale, stubborn dust that offers more rocks than sustenance. Each year you plow deeper for less return. The frame house your grandfather built groans in the wind, and the roof leaks more than a colander. You're not a farmer. You're the caretaker of a slow failure. Your days are measured by the sun and the pain. You wake before dawn. Your back already a map of familiar protests. You work the fields until the sun sets, then fall into a bed that offers little relief, only to wake and do it all over again. You are not living. You are in a cycle of exhaustion. The Civil War took your brothers and left the country in a fever of rebuilding. But here, in your little corner of the world, it left only silence and a debt to the town bank that grows like weeds. The banker, a man with soft hands and a thin smile, visits you every harvest. His smile is more frightening than any storm. One day, at the grocery store in town, as you trade your eggs for salt and kerosene, you see it, tacked to the wall of the store, a colorful pamphlet. It's like a flower growing in a field of ash. The colors are too bright, too optimistic for this world. The drawing shows a family that doesn't look like yours. They're sturdy, smiling, rosy-cheeked. Their house is made of new, solid wood. Their fields are a yellow so golden it looks like gold. Above, the words leap out at you. Free land. A new beginning in the West. You pick one up. The paper is smooth, unlike your rough skin. The text is a siren song. It tells of Homestead Act, a government law offering 160 acres of land to any man who would claim it and cultivate it. Look. The word echoes in his mind. The pamphlet describes the soil of Nebraska and Kansas as deep and black, free of rocks, so fertile that a crop grows almost without effort. It speaks of crystal clear rivers, vast prairies under an endless blue sky, and a healthy climate, perfect for raising strong children. The pamphlet, you see, is a professional liar. It doesn't mention the blizzards that can bury a man and his cattle. It doesn't mention the swarms of locusts that can devour an entire crop in an afternoon. It doesn't mention the crushing loneliness, the wind that never stops blowing, and the fact that free of rocks usually means full of roots as thick as your arm. And it definitely doesn't mention the Sioux or the Cheyenne, for whom this free land already has a name and a history. But the poison of hope, once injected, is hard to ignore. You take the leaflet home. At night, with the children asleep, you show it to your wife, Martha. She reads it by the flickering light of the lamp. Her face, usually a mask of weary resilience, falls. She is the anchor of common sense to your ship of despair. "It's a desert," she says, her voice low. "My mother's cousin went. They didn't last a year. The child died of a fever. Her husband died of a snake bite. She came back with nothing." "But 160 acres, Martha," you insist. "Our own land. No banker. No exhausted soil. Here we have a roof, even if it leaks." She retorts, her eyes flashing. "We have neighbors. We have your father's grave. There, we have only the sky, and the sky will not shelter you from a hailstorm." The argument goes on for weeks. It is a war fought in whispers, so as not to wake the children. But with each day that you look out over your barren fields, with each letter from the banker, the balance tips towards the west. It is not the dream of wealth that seduces you. It is the chance to escape certain failure. Going west is a terrible risk. Staying is a certain sentence. Finally, with tears in her eyes and fear in her heart, Martha agrees. The decision, once made, triggers an avalanche. Her life becomes an auction. The process of selling everything is like ripping off your own skin. The plow your father used, sold for $1 to a neighbor who won't even look you in the eye. The 2 skinny cows, the bed your children were born in, the rocking chairs on the porch, it's all gone. Neighbors hover like vultures, picking apart the pieces of your life for a pittance. You feel naked, exposed. Each item sold erases a piece of who you were. With the money, a small, pathetic pile of coins and bills, you make the pilgrimage back to town. You buy your ark, a covered wagon, not the prairie schooner from the cartoons. It's a worn wooden box with a squeaky wheel and a patched canvas roof. You buy 2 oxen, which the salesman swears are strong and trusty. They just look old and grumpy. The rest of the money goes to supplies. Sacks of cornmeal, beans, salted bacon, coffee, sugar, salt. Barrels for water. Essential tools. An axe, a saw, a shovel. And of course, your rifle and ammunition. The last night at home is surreal. The house is empty, echoing with the ghosts of your own life. You sleep on the floor, wrapped in blankets. It's a rehearsal for the future. The next morning comes the final choice. What to take? The wagon has a weight limit, and the oxen are not young. Martha wants to take her grandmother's small wooden chest, filled with letters and a family Bible. You look at the chest, then at the space it would take up. That space could hold another sack of flour, Grandma's rocking chair, or another 100 pounds of bacon. Bacon doesn't lull you to sleep, but it doesn't starve you either. Bacon wins. More often than not, survival wins over memory. The small wooden chest is allowed a single heavy luxury. The wagon is loaded. It's your whole world on 4 wheels. Your home, your pantry, your future. The goodbyes are quick and painful. Martha's mother hugs you, crying. "God bless you," she whispers. But her eyes say, "You're crazy." You climb onto the driver's plank. Martha climbs in beside you, her face pale but resolute. The children, Jebediah and little Sarah, look out from the back of the wagon, their eyes wide with curiosity. You snap the reins. The oxen lower their heads and, with a collective groan of protest, begin to pull. The wooden wheels squeak in the dirt. The cart lurches and begins to move westward toward the morning sun. You don't look back. You don't dare. To look back is to admit what you're missing. To look forward is all that's left. You're betting your life and the lives of your family on a promise made on a cheap piece of paper. And the only thing scarier than leaving is the thought of having stayed. You join the current. In a starting town like Independence, Missouri, what was once your solitary journey merges into a slow, chaotic river of humanity. Hundreds of wagons like yours, thousands of head of cattle, and a crowd of dreamers, fugitives, and fools, all looking west with the same mixture of hope and fear in their eyes. The town is a pandemonium of farriers hammering away, vendors shouting prices for last-minute supplies, and men arguing over which trail to follow. There is no organized start. Only one day does the wagon train captain, a former fur trapper, elected because he had a map and a stern expression, give the order, and the great wooden and canvas beast begins to move. Speed is the first lie the West tells you. You don't gallop off into the sunset. You crawl. The speed of your new life is the speed of a walking ox, about 2 miles an hour. For the first few days, you barely make any progress. Stuck in a traffic jam of wagons, each family as clumsy and inexperienced as yours. Then, civilization disappears behind your back, and you enter the true ocean, the prairie. And it is here that you meet your new constant companion, your new god, the dust. It is not the familiar dust of a country road. It is a fine alkaline dust, kicked up by hundreds of wheels and thousands of hooves. It forms a permanent cloud that hangs over the caravan. It gets into your lungs, making you cough up gray sludge. It seeps into your food, giving every meal a gritty texture. It coats your face, your clothes, the hair of the oxen. At night, you try to wipe it off your children's faces, but it is a losing battle. You live, eat, and sleep in the dust. It is the baptism of the West. The daily routine settles in with a crushing monotony. Up before dawn, in the cool prairie air, building a fire with whatever you've managed to gather, usually dried buffalo dung, called prairie chips, which burns with a familiar acrid smell. Coffee, cornbread, and salty bacon, then work, harnessing the steers which never cooperate, and then walking. You don't ride in the wagon, that's a myth for the weak. The wagon is crammed with your few possessions, and the rocking is so violent it would break your bones. So you walk. Beside the wagon all day, your feet, accustomed to the soft earth of a farm, protest. They blister, which burst, which become open sores. Martha walks beside you, her face covered with a handkerchief to filter the dust, her lips chapped by the sun and wind. Your son, Jebediah, 8 years old, tries to keep up, his childish bravery slowly eroded by exhaustion. Only little Sarah, 4 years old, has the luxury of riding in the back of the wagon, a tiny ghost among the sacks of flour. The majesty of the open plains is something you fully appreciate in the first week. The vast sky, the grass rippling like a sea. By the third week, you would be willing to trade all that majesty for a single tree, a single shadow. The landscape does not change. It is the same endless canvas of green and blue day after day. The only entertainment is watching the wheels of the wagon in front of you turn, creak, turn. The sound becomes the soundtrack of your existence. The only landmarks in this ocean of grass are graves. Small wooden crosses or piles of stones left by previous caravans. Each one is a silent warning. Someone did not make it, and it is in this boredom that the real danger arises. Complacency. You stop paying attention for a second, and a wagon wheel sinks into a prairie dog hole, breaking an axle. A disaster. The entire caravan stops. The repairs take half a day, using inadequate tools and the brute strength of men. You learn to cooperate, not out of friendship, but out of necessity. The misfortune of one is the delay of all. Then there are the dangers that come from the sky. One afternoon, the vast blue sky darkens in minutes. A sickly green cloud forms on the horizon. The wind dies. An eerie, heavy silence falls over the prairie. The wagon train captain shouts, "Storm!" You rush to tie up your animals, to cover what you can in the wagon. The storm hits you not as rain, but as a physical assault. Wind that threatens to rip the canvas off your wagon, rain that falls in horizontal sheets, and hail. Ice boulders the size of hen's eggs that bruise your oxen and dent your water barrels. You huddle together in the cramped wagon, listening to the roar of the world outside, feeling utterly helpless. The storm passes as quickly as it came, leaving behind a world that is soggy, bruised, and a new level of fear. But the most feared enemy makes no noise. He is silent and invisible. Cholera. The ghost of the trail. He arrives without warning. A woman in the German wagon who smiled at you the night before begins to feel ill after lunch. Vomiting, diarrhea, cramps. By sunset, she is dead. Panic spreads through the caravan like wildfire. Was it the water? The food? Paranoia poisons the camp. The German family buries their dead in a shallow grave, marking her with a simple wooden cross. There is no time for proper mourning. The next morning, the caravan must move on. Leaving a fresh grave behind, knowing that the wolves will probably find it before nightfall, is one of the hardest cruelties of the trail. Crossing a river is the climax of terror. The Platte River, for example. It is not deep, but it is wide, a mile wide in some places, and full of quicksand and treacherous currents. There are no bridges. You have to cross. The wagons are tied together. Men scream. The oxen low in fear. The wheels sink into the mud at the bottom. A wagon near yours loses its balance, rocks dangerously, and overturns. The family watches helplessly from the bank as their possessions, their clothes, their tools, their memories are swept away by the brown current. You hold your breath as your own wagon creaks and struggles against the current. Reaching the other side, soaked, shaking, but whole, is like being born again. At night, the caravan forms a circle. It is a temporary fortress against the darkness. Fires are lit. The women prepare the same meal as always. The men tend the animals and fix what is broken during the day. It is a village on wheels, a fragile community united by fear and distance. You get to know your neighbors, you learn who is generous, who is selfish, who tells the best stories, and who has the best cachaça. You don't have to like them, you just need them to survive. Months pass, you are no longer the Missouri farmer, you are thinner, your skin tanned to leather by the sun, your eyes are perpetually squinted against the glare. The optimism of the brochure is a distant memory, a bad joke. It has been replaced by a hard, no-nonsense determination. Your goal is no longer the promised land. It is to survive until the next watering hole. It is to make sure your children don't get sick. It is to make it to the other side of the mountains that now loom on the horizon, a wall of stone and snow. The journey has already taken a part of you, and you know with a cold certainty that settles into your bones that it is not over yet. It has barely begun. The end of the trail is not an arrival. It is a dissolution. The caravan, that village on wheels that was your universe for months, is falling apart. Families wave a weary goodbye and turn their wagons in different directions, each in search of a wooden stake with their name on it, driven into the middle of nowhere by a surveyor they will never find. You find yours. A lonely sliver of wood in the middle of an ocean of grass, already half swallowed by the earth. You stop the wagon. The creaking of the wheels stops, and the silence that follows is deafening. The only sound is the wind, a constant, relentless wind that sweeps across the prairie without finding a single tree to stop it. You, Martha, and the children climb out of the wagon and stand watching. This is it. This is the promised land. The 160 acres in the pamphlet. There are no orchards. There are no crystal clear rivers. There is no wooden house waiting for you. There is only grass, tall, dense grass that stretches in every direction, rippling in the wind like an endless green sea. Above, a sky so vast and empty that it makes you feel small and insignificant. The promise on paper, when confronted with reality, reveals itself to be a cruel joke. You look at Martha's face. The fragile hope she carried has died in her eyes, replaced by silent shock. You have traveled 2,000 kilometers, buried acquaintances, sold your past, to get nowhere. The first few days are an exercise in denial. You live in the wagon, which now seems like a palace compared to the vastness outside. You explore your property. You walk for hours, and it feels like you've never moved. The earth is not the soft black soil of the propaganda. Beneath the grass, the soil is hard, compacted, a web of roots so thick and ancient, they feel like the tendons of the planet itself. You stick your shovel into the earth, and it recedes with a dull thud. The existential crisis arrives on the third day. To survive the coming winter, you need shelter. But how do you build shelter in a place where there are no trees? The wood from your wagon is precious, needed for repairs, perhaps for a door frame and a roof beam. You cannot build a house with it. You sit in your wagon, the weight of your catastrophic decision crushing your shoulders. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. It is Martha who finds the solution. She points to the ground. "This is what we build with," she says, her voice firm, though her eyes betray the horror of the idea. "We build with this." She means the earth. You have seen examples along the way. Strange, low structures that seem to grow out of the ground. Turf houses, soddies. Your new home will be made of mud and grass. You have left a wooden house in Missouri to build a glorified anthill in the middle of nowhere. The American dream, it turns out, is surprisingly humble. The work of building the soddy is the most brutal task you will ever face. It is harder than harvesting, more tiring than threshing. First, you have to cut the bricks. The prairie marble, as some optimists call it. You use your plow to cut long strips of peat from the ground. The old oxen groan in protest, and so do you. The plow blade struggles against the network of roots. Each strip, nearly 3 feet long, has to be lifted and then cut into blocks with a shovel. Each block weighs more than 40 pounds. It is hard, repetitive, and demoralizing work. You are literally deconstructing your field to build your house. Martha and even young Jebediah help, carrying the heavy, wet earthen bricks. Your hands are raw. Your backs scream. You work in the relentless sun, covered in dirt and sweat. Slowly, painfully, the walls begin to rise. You stack them like a bricklayer, grass side down, overlapping the joints for strength. The walls are thick, nearly 3 feet thick. They offer the promise of insulation against the summer heat and the bitter cold of winter. You leave an opening for a door and a small window. You use the most precious wood you have to frame them. The roof is the biggest challenge. You put up the few wooden beams you manage to bring, cover them with willow branches you found near a stream miles away, then with a layer of prairie grass, and finally with more peat bricks. After weeks of exhausting work, the thing is ready. It's not a house. It's a small mound of earth with a door. From a distance, it looks like the ground has had indigestion, but it's a shelter. You move from the wagon to your new residence. The interior is dark. The only window is small, to keep the heat in, and the result is perpetual darkness. The smell is of damp earth, of cut roots, and of mold. The floor is made of packed earth, which turns to mud whenever someone spills water on it. And you are not alone. The turf house is a thriving ecosystem. Insects, earthworms, and maggots once lived in its bricks, and now they are your roommates. Spiders spin webs in the dark corners. Mice quickly discover that this is a haven of grain and warmth, and occasionally a snake seeking warmth or a mouse slithers in through the walls or drops from the ceiling. The first time this happens, Martha lets out a scream that echoes across the prairie. You learn to shake out your boots before putting them on and never leave a piece of bread on the floor. The first big rain is the final test. You huddle inside, listening to the rain pounding on the dirt roof. The roof doesn't collapse. A victory. But it leaks. Not with clean water, but with a steady drip of mud. Cold brown drops fall on the table, on your bed, on your head. Martha sets out pots and buckets to catch the drips, and the night is filled with the sound of plink, plink, plink. It's the lullaby of your new home. One night, sitting at the makeshift table, looking at Martha's tired face lit by a single tallow candle, the weight of reality hits you full force. You've left everything behind, crossed a continent, risked the lives of your family, all for this, to live in a dark, damp, earthen hut that leaks mud and that you share with snakes and rats. You look at your children, sleeping under a blanket that is already damp. They look so fragile. You wonder if they will survive their first winter. The promise of the brochure, with its smiling family and golden fields, now seems like a mockery, a hallucination. But then you look at the walls. The thick earthen walls you cut and piled with your own hands. They are ugly, imperfect, but they are solid. Outside, the prairie wind howls like a wolf, a sound of loneliness and danger. But inside, the sound is muffled. The earthen house, miserable as it is a refuge. It is your fort. The war against the West was not the journey. The journey was only the way to the battlefield. The real war, the war against the wind, the snow, the drought, and the earth itself, is just beginning. And this mud house is its trench. With your mud and grass fortress established, you begin the next phase of your American dream. Farming. The brochure promises soil so fertile that you only need to tickle it with a hoe, and it will laugh with a harvest. This, you discover, is the most poetic and cruel lie of all. Your first task is sod busting, breaking up the peat. You hitch your tired old oxen to the plow and try to drive the blade into the earth. The earth fights back. It is not soft. It is a thick, tangled mat of prairie grass roots, woven over millennia, as tough as leather. The plow sputters, bounces, and sometimes stops completely, nearly breaking. It is a fight for every inch. You yell at the oxen, push the plow with your body weight, sweat running into your eyes. By the end of the first day, you've managed to plow a strip of land so small and pathetic that it looks like a scar on the face of the prairie. You look out over the remaining 159 acres and feel a despair as vast as the landscape. Slowly you make progress. You, Martha, and Jebediah. You plant your corn, your potatoes, your pumpkins. The tiny green seedlings that poke through the brown earth seem like a miracle, a fragile promise in the wilderness. It's the first time you've felt a spark of hope since you left Missouri. It's a spark that summer is eager to extinguish. Summer on the prairie is not a season, it is an assault. The sun is a bronze hammer in a cloudless, treeless sky. There is no shade, nowhere. The heat is a physical enemy that saps your strength, makes you dizzy, and cracks the earth beneath your feet. The water in the distant stream becomes more precious than gold. But the heat is only the beginning. The sky, your only companion, is bipolar. In an afternoon, it can turn from brilliant blue to sickly yellow-green in a matter of minutes. The storms here are not summer showers. They are biblical furies. The wind howls like a freight train. The hail destroys your fragile crops. And the lightning dances across the plain, seeking the only tall thing for miles, your turf home. Then, on a hot July day, the real terror comes. It begins as a dark cloud on the western horizon. You think it's another storm. But the cloud doesn't thunder, it hums. A low, growing hum, the sound of a million tiny teeth preparing for a feast. They are grasshoppers, not a swarm. A plague. They come like a brown pulsing tide, covering the sky, blotting out the sun. The sound is deafening. They descend on your fields, on everything. You and Martha and Jebediah run outside, screaming, waving blankets, trying in vain to shoo them away. It's like trying to stop a flood with your bare hands. The locusts cover every inch of your corn plants, every pumpkin leaf. They eat Martha's garden to the ground. They eat the patched canvas on her wagon. They eat the clothes on the line. In 2 hours, they're gone, as suddenly as they came. They leave behind shocked silence and utter devastation. Their fields, which were their hope, are now just bare, chewed stalks. That night, for the first time, you see Martha cry. Not loud tears, but a silent, hopeless cry that is much worse. The pamphlet made no mention of the locusts. You survive on what's left, hunting rabbits and prairie birds. Fall is a frantic race to harvest what little remains and prepare for the next enemy, winter. Winter does not come, it surrounds you. The wind, which was your irritating companion in summer, becomes a deadly weapon. It carries a chill that seems to penetrate your bones. The temperature plummets. The turf house, which was a stove in summer, is now a cave of ice. You huddle around the fire, feeding it with dried buffalo dung, the only fuel available. It burns with a low heat and a pungent smell that permeates everything. Then, the blizzard hits. It's not just snow. It's a howling white wall that blots out the world. For 3 days, you're trapped inside your small dirt house. Visibility outside is 0. Going out to feed the cows in the small shelter you've built 20 yards away is a potentially fatal mission. You string a rope from the door of the house to the shelter, your only lifeline to keep from getting lost in the white storm, and, freezing to death, steps from your own door. Winter loneliness is a disease of the soul. Locked in the gloom of the soddy, the only sound the howling of the wind, your mind begins to play tricks on you. The vastness outside becomes a crushing pressure. The walls of earth seem to close in on you. Small irritations turn into tense arguments. A child's cry seems to echo for hours. It is cabin fever, a silent madness born of isolation and fear. Spring, when it finally returns, seems like a lie. The snow melts, revealing a brown, soggy world. But with the heat and dryness comes a new danger. Prairie fire. On a dry, windy day, a spark from a lightning strike miles away can start an inferno. You see the smoke on the horizon, a thin line that quickly becomes a wall of orange flames, racing through the dry grass faster than a horse. The panic is primal. You run, using your own bodies and wet blankets to smother the flying embers. You and Jebediah use the plow to quickly create a fire break, a strip of bare earth around your home. The roar of the fire is monstrous, the heat searing. You fight for hours. Your face is black with soot, your lungs burning. The fire passes you by, a freight train of destruction, leaving behind a black and smoldering world. Your house, being made of earth, survives. Your animals, which you manage to gather from the plowed field, are safe. You are exhausted, terrified, but alive. At the end of that first year, you stand outside your turf house and look out over your land. It has been scorched by the sun, eaten by insects, frozen by snow, and ravaged by fire. The promised land. You didn't find a garden. You found a battlefield. You fought the planet, and the battle ended in a brutal draw. You didn't prosper, you didn't grow rich, but you're still standing. You, Martha, Jebediah, Sarah, you survived. And in the cruel logic of the West, this is not just a victory, it is everything. The war for your future is not over. It has only completed its first long and bloody campaign. The silence after the first snowfall is an eerie thing. It is a silence so deep and absolute that you can almost hear the blood pounding in your ears. For months, the world has been just you, Martha, the children, and the howling of the wind. Loneliness is a physical presence, a table companion who eats your food and shares your bed. You begin to talk to the oxen, not out of affection, but just to hear another voice. Martha sings to herself as she works, the same old Missouri songs, but the melody sounds thin and lost in the vastness. Then one spring morning, as you repair the door of your turf house, you hear it. A distant sound carried on the wind. A sound you haven't heard in over a year. The sound of a hammer hitting wood. You stop, your heart pounding. You climb onto the roof of your soddy and look out at the horizon. About 2 miles to the east, a small cloud of smoke rises into the sky. Smoke means fire. Fire means people. That same day, you hitch one of the oxen to the cart and set off toward the smoke. It is the first time you have left your land since you arrived. As you get closer, the view becomes clear. Another cart, another family, and the beginnings of another turf house being raised from the ground. It is the Schmidts, a family of German immigrants who barely speak English, but whose exhausted, determined faces are a mirror of yours. The encounter is awkward, full of gestures and broken words. But when Mr. Schmidt offers you a sip of schnapps from a metal flask, a warmth spreads through your chest that does not come from alcohol. It is the warmth of relief. You are no longer alone. In the months that follow, more arrive. The Garretts from Tennessee, the O'Malleys from Ireland. An invisible village begins to form, a constellation of small, stubborn turf houses, each separated from the next by miles of grass, but connected by a mutual need for survival. The proof of this new community comes when the Schmidt's ox dies, bitten by a rattlesnake. They cannot finish their house. The news spreads, traveling as fast as a man on horseback. The following Sunday, his family, the Garretts, and the O'Malleys gather at the Schmidt's property. It is a soddy raising. The men work together, cutting and stacking the heavy earthen bricks in the hot sun. The women prepare a communal meal, gathering what little each family has to create a feast. The children, once alone, run and scream in the grass, finally having faces other than those of their brothers to see. The work is hard, but the mood is festive. There is conversation, laughter. Men exchange tips on how to plow the stubborn soil. Women exchange seeds and advice on how to keep snakes out of the pantry. By the end of the day, the Schmidt house is standing. You eat together as the sun sets, sharing stories and homebrew. For one night, the prairie doesn't feel so empty and threatening. It feels like home. Civilization comes in other forms, too. One day, a man on horseback appears on the horizon. He is an itinerant preacher, a circuit rider with a worn Bible in his saddlebags and fire in his eyes. His arrival is an event. Everyone gathers at his house, the largest and most central. He baptizes the children born on the prairie with water from his creek. He performs the marriage of the eldest Garrett's son to the O'Malley daughter. And then he preaches a sermon. His voice echoes through his small living room, speaking of sin and salvation, of hell and heaven. To people starving for spiritual connection and news of the outside world, his words are like water to the parched land. But humanity does not only bring cooperation, it brings conflict. To the south of your land, a new kind of man is settling in. Not a farmer, but a rancher. A man named Henderson, who owns hundreds of head of cattle that roam freely across the prairie. To him, all this grass is open pasture. To you, it is your future cornfield. Conflict is inevitable. Henderson's cattle repeatedly invade your land, trampling your fragile crops. You go to his ranch to talk. The contrast is stark. He lives in a real log house built with lumber hauled in by the railroad. He has cowboys, rough men who look at you with contempt. Henderson listens to you with a sneer. "The cattle need to graze, farmer," he says. "If you don't like it, build a fence." To him, you and your small farm are a nuisance, a scar on the open landscape. Injustice consumes you. You take a week-long trip to the railroad town and spend a physically painful amount of money on the West's most hated and most necessary invention, barbed wire. Getting the fence in is hellish work. You and Jebediah drive in the wooden posts and stretch the coils of barbed wire. Each barb rips your hands, but every foot of fence is a declaration. This is my land. This is the boundary. The fence is a battle line drawn on the prairie. The next week, you wake up to find your fence cut in 3 places, your cattle scattered. The war has begun. A cold war of sabotage and silent threats. And there are other strangers. The shadows in the grass. One afternoon, as you mend the fence for the umpteenth time, you see them. A small group of Sioux warriors riding their horses on a distant ridge. They make no sound. They make no threatening gestures. They just watch. You stop working. Your heart pounds in your chest. You slowly reach for the rifle you always carry with you. Martha and the children, who were nearby, retreat to the safety of the sod house. The silence on the prairie is absolute, broken only by the wind. You stare at each other across the vast distance. You, the intruder with your barbed wire fence. They, the ghosts of the land that was once theirs. You don't know what they're thinking. Contempt, anger, sadness. All you feel is a deep fear and the weight of being a thief, even though your government's law says the land is yours. After what seems like an eternity, their leader raises his hand, not in threat, but in a gesture you can't quite interpret. Then, they turn their horses and disappear over the horizon, as silently as they appeared. The encounter lasts no more than an hour, but it leaves you shaken for days. It's a reminder that this war isn't just against the planet or other white men. It's a war waged over the bones and memories of a people you've replaced. You look at your little turf house, now surrounded by neighbors who bring comfort, by enemies who bring anxiety, and by ghosts who bring a guilt you cannot name. You came west in search of a simple life. You're discovering that there is no such thing. The lonely war is over. The much more complicated war of living together has only just begun. It's been 3 years since you laid the last peat brick on your house. 3 cycles of fighting the planet. You've had a good harvest, a bad one, and one that was a desperate negotiation with the locusts. You've survived. But survival comes at a cost. The salt is gone. Martha's sewing needles are broken. The children's clothes are more patches than original fabric. It's time. Time to go to town. The city is a concept your children barely understand. To them, the world is the turf house, the fields, and the infrequent visits to their neighbors. The town you speak of, Prairie Hill, is 2 days' journey by wagon. It did not exist when you arrived. It sprang up out of nowhere beside the iron tracks that now cut across the prairie, like a steel scar. The railroad is your lifeline and your curse. It brings you the tools and supplies you need, but it also brings the noisy, greedy world you thought you had left behind. Preparing for the trip is an event. You load the surplus corn into the wagon. Martha makes a mental list of needs, a list that is painfully long and expensive. The children, Jebediah and Sarah, are filled with nervous excitement. They're going to see a real train. The journey itself is familiar, but the landscape has changed. You see other properties, other barbed wire fences, other clouds of smoke on the horizon. The west is filling up. Then, on the second day, you hear it. A sound that doesn't belong here. A high-pitched, piercing whistle, followed by a heavy rhythmic thud. It's the sound of progress. It's the sound of the train. Soon, you see it. Prairie Hill. It's not a town. It's a gaping wound in the landscape. A collection of hastily constructed wooden buildings with false facades that try to look more important than they are. They line a single main street, which is a sea of dried mud and dust. The backbone of it all is the iron rails, gleaming in the sun. As you enter Main Street, the sensory assault begins. The noise is overwhelming. The whine of a steam locomotive in the depot, the clang of a blacksmith, the sound of an out-of-tune piano, and loud laughter leaking through the doors of a saloon, and the constant shouting of men trading, arguing, living their lives in public. The smell is even worse. A potent mix of coal smoke, horse manure, spilled whiskey, and the smell of frying pork fat. Your children cling to Martha, their eyes wide. Civilization, you discover, smells of chaos and opportunities to be deceived. You look like strangers in your own land. Your clothes are homespun, faded by the sun. Your faces are weathered by the wind. You move slowly, overwhelmed by the cacophony. In contrast, the townspeople move with feverish energy. Cowboys in big hats and loud spurs come and go from saloons. Merchants in suits and ties stand in the doorways of their shops. And everywhere are railroad workers, many of them Irish or Chinese immigrants, with tired faces and strong muscles. Your first stop is the grain elevator next to the tracks. A man with a tobacco-stained mustache weighs your corn. He examines the grain, makes a disapproving sound, and offers you a price that is almost insulting. The market is low, he lies, without even looking you in the eye. Too much moisture in this lot, you know you're being ripped off. But what can you do? Carry your corn back 2 days' journey. You accept the price, the bitter taste of helplessness in your mouth. With the few coins you've been given, you head to the general store. To your children, it's a place of magic. Shelves reach to the ceiling, filled with things they've never seen before. Barrels of cookies and pickles, bolts of fabric in vibrant colors, tools of shiny steel, and, on a glass counter, a treasure trove of colorful candies. Sarah's eyes nearly pop out of her head. For you, it's a minefield of expense. The store owner, a shrewd man who smiles too much, knows you have no choice. A bag of salt costs twice as much as it did in Missouri. Martha's sewing needles are sold like jewels. You feel your hard-earned money slipping through your fingers. Martha, ever practical, argues about the price of the fabric, getting a small discount that feels like a big win. You buy a small bag of candy for the kids. It's an extravagant treat, but when you see the smiles on their faces, you know it was worth it. As you load the supplies into the wagon, civilization shows its other side. A cowboy, clearly drunk, stumbles out of the saloon across the street. He draws his revolver and fires 3 shots into the air, yelling with glee. People scatter, the horses startle. Martha quickly shoves the children behind the wagon. It's casual, senseless violence that makes your blood run cold. The town sheriff comes out of his office. He's not a barrel-chested hero. He's an older man with a beer belly and a tired look. He doesn't draw his gun. He walks calmly up to the cowboy and speaks to him in a low voice. After a few minutes of conversation, the cowboy, looking like a scolded child, puts his gun away and is led away by the sheriff to sleep off the drunkenness in his cell. Law in the West, you realize, isn't about quick duels. It's about damage management and deep exhaustion. You don't dare stay in the only hotel in town, a noisy and expensive place. You camp on the edge of town, near other farming families like yourselves. Around your small campfire, you eat some of the bread and cheese you bought. In the distance, you hear the sounds of the town. The piano, laughter, a shout. The whistle of another train arriving in the darkness. Prairie Hill is the beating heart of this new world. It's your connection to everything. Supplies, news, the economy. But it's not a welcoming place. It's a greedy, noisy, and dangerous place. It's a place that serves you and exploits you at the same time. You look at your family, their faces lit by the fire. They are exhausted, but also in awe of what they have seen. You know you will have to return to this town many times. But as you lie down to sleep under the stars, with the sound of progress echoing in the distance, you feel a deep longing for home. For the quiet, for the peace of your lonely little mud fortress, miles away from all this civilization. The years pass, not like a river, but like the slow, steady drip of water on a stone. The stone is you. Each season leaves a new mark, a new crack. You no longer count time in years, but in harvests. 7 good harvests, 4 bad ones, 3 blizzards that nearly wiped out your livestock, a fire that stopped inches from your house, and the drought of 81 that left the ground as cracked as the skin on your hands. Your sod house is now a part of the landscape, its roof covered in grass and wildflowers, almost indistinguishable from a natural hill. You have added a second room, a luxury that took a summer's work. Your little property is no longer a solitary speck. More lamplights now flicker in the prairie darkness. Neighbors miles away, but neighbors nonetheless. The railroad town has grown. The West is being tamed, the newspapers that arrive now and then say. You look at your hands, gnarled and permanently stained with dirt, and wonder who is taming whom. The children have grown up. Jebediah is no longer a boy. He is a tall, quiet young man, with the same stubborn determination you had, but with less hope in his eyes. He was born for this life. He knows no other. He works beside you in the fields, and you begin to notice that his strength now surpasses yours. He can lift a sack of grain more easily. He can guide the plow for longer. You feel a mixture of pride and a pang of obsolescence. You are becoming the old man in the story. Sarah, her daughter, is now a young woman. She has Martha's resilience, but something of the vast sky in her eyes. She helps around the house, has learned to cook, to sew, to tend the garden with a skill that rivals her mother's. She is the light in the darkness of her turf house. Life becomes a roulette wheel of nature. One year, the rains come at just the right time, the sun is warm but not cruel, and the locusts decide to plague another county. The harvest is plentiful. The corn grows tall, the wheat is heavy. On the trip to town, you get a good price. For the first time, there is a surplus, a small profit. With the money, you buy things that seem like extravagant luxuries. A bolt of printed cotton fabric for Martha and Sarah to make new dresses. A real steel knife for Jebediah. and even glass for your window, replacing the oiled paper that kept tearing. That night, you eat store-bought sweets and feel like kings. Maybe, you think, maybe it was worth it. The next year, the prairie decides to remind you who's in charge. A drought sets in early summer. The sky becomes a brass bowl, relentless and cloudless for weeks on end. The creek dries up. The corn plants wither and turn yellow. You dig a deeper well with your hands and back, but the water you find is sparse and brackish. The harvest is a disaster. You gather enough to keep you from starving, but there's nothing to sell. The debt at the town general store grows. Martha's new dress seems like a mockery. It is the following winter that the West exacts its greatest toll. Not with fire or drought, but with silence. A fever comes to the scattered community, brought by a traveler. It spreads from one property to another. It is swift and vicious. It strikes home. Sarah is the first to fall. At first it's just a cough. Then the fever flares. You do everything you know. Martha's cold compresses. The herbal teas her grandmother used. The desperate prayers. But the fever won't break. You're snowed in. There's no doctor. There's no help. You just watch, helpless, as the life drains from her. Her breathing becomes a shallow, labored sound. One morning, the sound stops. The silence that fills your turf house afterward is a physical thing. It's heavy, suffocating. Jebediah sits in a corner, his face blank. Martha moves like an automaton, her movements devoid of their usual efficiency. You feel hollow, as if something fundamental has been ripped from you. Your daughter's small, feverish body lies in bed for 2 days, until a break in the blizzard allows you and Jebediah to leave. You dig a grave in the frozen earth, a brutal labor that takes hours. You bury her in a small patch of ground overlooking the valley, her favorite place. You carve the wooden cross yourself. There is no sermon, no hymns, just the sound of the wind and the sound of your own heart breaking. The promise of the West, the promise of a better life for your children, now seems like the cruelest of lies. What kind of life is better than ending in a lonely grave on a windswept hill? The years that follow are gray. The work goes on because it has to. But the joy is gone. You become the old man you see sitting on the porch of your house, staring at the horizon. You look at your fields, now fenced, ordered. The wild grass has been tamed. But at what cost? You look at your hands, now deformed by arthritis, and at Martha's face, a map of pain and loss. One day, you find the small wooden chest where Martha keeps her treasures. Inside, among the yellowed letters, is the pamphlet. The paper that started it all. It is worn and fragile. You unfold it carefully. The colors are still bright. The smiling family, the wooden house, the golden fields. You read the words again. Free land. Rich soil. Bright future. You laugh. A dry, humorless sound. Was it all a lie? No, not exactly. The earth was yours, at least on paper, but you were never its master. You were its servant, its prisoner. You did not find paradise. You found an anvil, and life hammered you on it until you took its shape. You look out the door. Jebediah is in the field, teaching his own young son, his grandson, how to repair a section of barbed wire. The cycle, the continuation, maybe that's what it really means. You didn't conquer the land for yourself. You bled it dry and tamed it for them. Your harvest was bitter, full of dust, sweat, and a pain that will never go away. But it was a harvest after all. You planted something. Now, it remains to be seen what the next generation will do with it. You fold the pamphlet and put it away. It is a good reminder. A reminder of the price of a dream. The world you once knew has shrunk to the view from your porch. You are an old man now, a relic of a fading age. The original turf house, your first miserable fortress, is now just a slowly crumbling mound of earth in the back, a barn for chickens. In its place stands a real, two-story frame house built by your son Jebediah from lumber, brought in by the railroad. It has glass windows and a roof that doesn't leak. It's a luxury you can barely comprehend. From your rocking chair, you gaze out at the transformed landscape. Where once there was an ocean of grass, there is now a patchwork of farmland. Barbed wire fences cut sharp, straight lines across the horizon. You see smoke rising from a dozen nearby chimneys. The absolute silence is gone, replaced by the distant sound of a twice-daily train, its whistle a constant reminder of the world beyond your fence. The wild prairie has been parceled out, tamed, and put on a map. And in the process, something vast and terrible has been lost. But something safe and predictable has been gained. Jebediah is the patriarch now. He is a good man, a better farmer than you ever were. He was born for this land. He understands its rhythms in a way that you, a stranger from Missouri, never fully understood. But you see on his shoulders the same weight you carried. The burden of debt to the town store, the anxiety before each harvest, the fear of a late frost or a blight on the wheat. You did not leave him an easy life. You left him your life, the struggle. Your grandchildren are the real mystery. They were born here. To them, this land is not a destination, it is simply home. They attend the one-room schoolhouse the community built near the creek. They can read and write with a fluency that surprises you. They read old newspapers that arrive by train, with stories of cities with names like Chicago and Denver, places with buildings taller than any barn and more people than you have ever seen in your life. Their world is already bigger than yours has ever been. The seed of change lies in his eldest grandson, Samuel. He is a bright young man with his maternal grandfather's nimble hands. He has no patience for farming. He doesn't look at the soil, he looks at the machinery. He is fascinated by the windmill that Jebediah has built, by the gears of the new steel plow, and above all, by the train. He can spend hours near the tracks, just watching the steam locomotive, a beast of iron and smoke. One day, he sits with you on the porch. "Grandpa," he says, "I don't want to be a farmer. I want to go to the city. I want to work on the railroad. I want to build things." You look into his eager young face and see yourself 50 years ago, staring at a colorful brochure. The same longing for escape, the same belief in a distant promise. But his West is not a land of free soil. It is a city of coal and steel and wages. Jebediah doesn't understand. To him, the land is everything. "Your grandfather and I bled for this land," he tells Samuel one tense night, "so that you could have something, and you want to throw it all away to work for a wage. But you understand. You understand all too well. The railroad, the same one that allowed you to survive by selling your grain, is now the trail that will carry your grandchildren away. The irony is as bitter as the overboiled coffee on the trail. You tamed the desert just so your children could have a safe place to start. Your time is coming. Martha was gone 3 winters ago, taken by pneumonia. You buried her on the hill, beside Sarah's little cross. Sometimes you walk there and talk to them, telling them about the harvest, about your grandchildren. The wind is the only answer. Your days are now spent in the rocking chair, in a state of quiet reflection. You remember the journey, the tired faces around the campfire, the terror of crossing the Platte River, the sound of the grasshoppers, the crushing silence in your turf house after Sarah left. Was it a fair price to pay for the promise of the pamphlet? You look at your land. The golden wheat fields swaying in the wind. The solid wooden house. The laughter of your grandchildren running around in the yard. Number. You haven't found paradise. Life here has never been easy. It has been a constant, often cruel struggle. But you look at your hands, now thin and stained with age. With these hands, you took a piece of nothing, a wind-swept void, and made it a home. You didn't find a dream. You forged a reality with sweat and pain, and a stubbornness that bordered on madness. And that, you decide, has to be enough. It is your legacy, a legacy of dust. Your death comes on an autumn night in your sleep, in a real bed, in a warm room, with a roof that doesn't leak. It's a peaceful death, a luxury you never expected to have. The family buries you on the hill next to Martha and Sarah. It is a small crowd that gathers. Your children, your grandchildren, the Schmidts, the O'Malleys, the Garretts, the survivors. They stand for a moment in silence under the vast sky. His grandson, Samuel, stands a little way off. He looks at the grave of his grandfather, the man who crossed a continent, but then his eyes turn, as they always do, to the east, to the iron rails gleaming in the distance. The prairie wind still blows, but now it carries a new sound. The whistle of a train heading toward the cities, toward the 20th century. The cycle of the land of sowing and reaping continues, but a new cycle, that of progress, change, and departure, is calling the next generation. Their war was to conquer the dust. Their war will be to decide whether to stay in it or to leave it behind in search of a new kind of promise and a new kind of role. And so the dust settles. The train whistle sounds in the distance, no longer a threat or a wonder, but simply the sound of a world that has moved on, leaving behind the ghosts and memories etched into the earth. We have crossed a continent and a lifetime with a family of pioneers. We began with a bright promise on a piece of paper and ended with a legacy of dust and stubbornness. We have seen hope turn into a house of turf, the joy of a harvest wiped out by blight, and the vast silence of the prairie filled with both the pain of loss and the strength of community. Their story is a powerful reminder that the Wild West of the movies is, for the most part, fiction. The real conquest was not made with guns at high noon, but with shovels, plows, and quiet, desperate courage in the face of blizzards, droughts, and a loneliness that could break the soul. It is the story of the founding of a nation, written not in ink, but in the sweat and tears of millions of nameless people whose names have been swept away by the wind. They were not seeking glory, they were seeking a place to exist. And in the process, they transformed an indifferent desert into a home. Their harvest was bitter indeed, but it was a harvest after all. Thank you so much for making this long and arduous journey with us. Thank you for braving the dust, the cold, and the pain of loss alongside us. It is a story that reminds us of the real price behind the myths that founded nations. Now, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment. What do you think is the modern version of the promise on paper? That dream that still makes people leave everything behind in search of a new life in an unknown place. If this saga touched you, please like it. Share it with those who enjoy a good story, and subscribe for more journeys through the real face of history. Until then, take care of yourselves, and may your foundations always be stronger than the storm. Until next time.